Hey everybody, this is Vince Miller. Thank you so much for joining me for another devotional. Today we are in Malachi. I'm going to read chapter 2, verses 13 down through 15. It reads, "And the second thing you do," so they've already done one thing, we'll come back to what that was. "You cover the Lord's altar with tears, and with weeping, and with groaning, because he no longer regards the offering," so the sacrifices that they bring, "or accept it with favor from your hand. But you say, why does he not?" Remember, in Malachi, there's all these rebuttal questions by God's people. Why does he not, they say here. And then Malachi says, "Because the Lord was witness between you and the wife of your youth." So now he's talking about their marital relationships. "To whom you've been faithless. Though she is your companion and your wife by covenant, did he not make them one?" Did God not make them one with a portion of the Spirit in their union? In other words, joined together by his Spirit. And what was the one God seeking? Godly offspring. That's it. "So guard yourselves in your spirit, and let none of you be faithless to the wife of your youth." So let's go back to yesterday's message and devotional. God's first issue with his people is that they've been unfaithful to him. They have committed spiritual adultery. That's because spiritual idolatry leads to spiritual adultery, which violates the first of the 10 commandments that God gave to his people. Remember it? "You shall have no other gods before me." But they weren't faithful to him. They have been entertaining other gods. Thus, they're spiritual adulterers. But here, in his second point, God brings up another issue. It's actual adultery in marriage. It appears God's people can't get either relationship right, their vertical relationship with him or their horizontal relationships with each other. So men in this situation are sleeping around with other women and even marrying unbelieving women. They were in relationships with what we would call unequally yoked marriages, which, by the way, was off limits. This was a well-known command given by God way back in Deuteronomy chapter 7. But over time, they conceded to cultural norms and ignored another one of God's 10 commandments. This one specifically is number 7, adultery in marriage. And therefore, they dismissed God's marital covenant. Now, I don't know why we don't talk about these kinds of issues more in the church or even speak more firmly about it. But nowhere in the Bible does God permit, either in the Old Testament or the New Testament, for a believing man to marry an unbelieving woman or vice versa. It's just not allowed. The basis of this principle can definitely be seen in Deuteronomy chapter 7, but it's also present in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 14. It reads like this: "Do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness?" Now, the basis of this principle in context of 2 Corinthians is speaking to ministry relationships, and yet it's essential to apply to all relationships. This is especially applicable to marriage because marriage is not a contract between two people. That's how we might see it today, but that's not what it is. Marriage is a spiritual covenant made with God by two people. It's a spiritual commitment that cannot be broken or changed or adapted in any way. It's designed to work best when upheld by two people, a man and a woman, who share common values and beliefs, which, by the way, leads to the best results. And that's what God is after here, the very best results for their life. Now, we have to remember that marriage was God's idea. It's not our idea. It's not the government's idea. It's not some person's idea that they came up with. God created man and woman and brought them together. He designed them for relationship, and he established the covenant between them. He gets to decide the rules because it's a spiritual union, as we see in this text here. And guess what? His plan is best, not your plan. And here's the kicker. God blesses his plan, not your plan, which is the issue these believers have with God in this text. They want God to bless their plan, but he ain't going to do it. They're crying and they're weeping and they're groaning on the altar because God isn't blessing their plans. And essentially, God says this back to them. If you want your plan, you can't have my blessings. Your plan, your blessings, my plan, my blessings. That's it. Now, this gives us, I think, a very, very good answer to why sometimes we are not experiencing spiritual blessings. It could be because we're asking for Him, God, to bless our plan. And He's not going to do that. So today, if you're not following His plan, make adjustments. Because guess what? God does provide spiritual blessings, true spiritual blessings to those who just follow His plan. Hard hitting, but it's the truth. I love you guys. I pray it blesses you. If it has, share it with someone else. And I'll see you right back here again tomorrow.